between the floors. The apartment building on Blackwood Street looked like any other relic of the post-war era. 10 stories of cracked brick and narrow balconies, a facade dulled by soot and rain. Rent was cheap, and that was all that mattered to Adrian Locke. A freelance illustrator with little money and less stability, he welcomed the musty corridors and flickering bulbs. He thought he could live with the peeling paint and the groaning pipes. But there was something about the building that unsettled him almost immediately. It wasn't the neighbors, he barely saw them. It wasn't the smell, though sometimes the air carried the faint tang of mildew and rust. No, it was the sound. At night, just past midnight, Adrian heard footsteps in the stairwell. They did not rise from below or descend from above. Instead, they echoed between floors as though someone were pacing in a space that did not exist. At first he assumed it was poor acoustics. The building was old, echoes could bounce in strange ways. But on his second night, he opened his door, peered into the dim stairwell, and realized there was nothing there. The sound came from the gap between the third and fourth floors, a hollow, muffled rhythm, as if boots dragged across invisible boards suspended in air. The landlord, an old woman with eyes like dull glass, brushed off his concern. "Old buildings settle," she muttered, handing him his rent receipt. "Best not to notice things you can't fix." On the fourth night, Adrian lingered by the stairwell as the clock struck midnight. The air thickened, and sure enough, the footsteps began again, slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth. He leaned over the railing, flashlight in hand, and shined it down. The beam stopped abruptly as though swallowed where the third floor ended. No dust, no walls, just a tremor in the air, like light bending through heat. Then came the sigh. Long, heavy, carrying years of loneliness. Adrian slammed his door and sat awake until dawn. He began asking neighbors about the sounds, but they turned away, muttering excuses. An old man in 5B only shook his head. "Don't feed it attention," he whispered, refusing to say more. A mother on the 7th floor gripped her daughter's hand and pulled her inside before Adrian could finish his question. Only Mrs. Greaves from 2C spoke to him. "It doesn't stay quiet if you listen too long," she warned. This place was built on the bones of another building. They didn't clear it properly. There's something left between the layers. Adrian laughed it off, but unease gnawed at him. One night, unable to resist, he pressed his ear to the wall by the stairwell. Whispers. Not one voice but many, layered like sediment. He couldn't make out words, but the tone was pleading, urgent. Then the footsteps resumed, louder this time, moving faster, as if someone trapped was running back and forth, desperate to be heard. Adrian backed away, heart pounding. He resolved to ignore it. But the following evening his drawings changed. Without realizing, he sketched staircases that ended in midair, doors opening into black voids, figures half-formed, pressed against glass. His hand moved faster than his thoughts, dragging charcoal into shapes he didn't recognize. When he tried to tear the pages, he found new sketches on fresh sheets each morning, though he hadn't drawn them. Always the same. A figure caught between floors, its face smudged into a scream. By the second week, Adrian's sleep unraveled. The pacing grew louder, creeping closer. Once, as he climbed from the second floor, he felt a hand brush his ankle through the gap. Cold, damp, and impossibly long. He stumbled, nearly falling, but when he looked down, nothing. Only darkness pooling between the steps. He stopped using the stairs, choosing the elevator instead. Yet even there, the sense of between haunted him. The lift often shuddered, halting for a moment between the third and fourth floors, as though caught in unseen hands. The lights flickered, and in the reflection of the steel doors, he swore he saw a shadow standing just behind him. Adrian's breaking point came on a storm-lashed night when power flickered and the building groaned like a dying animal. The elevator failed, leaving only the stairwell. He had no choice but to climb. As he reached the third floor, the air grew colder, heavy with the smell of damp earth. Halfway up the steps, the space stretched unnaturally, elongating into darkness. The fourth floor landing seemed impossibly far. The footsteps returned, this time not pacing but advancing toward him from the void. He ran, but the stairs warped beneath him. the walls stretched taller, shadows bleeding like ink. A figure emerged where no floor should exist. A man-shaped silhouette with limbs too thin, joints bent wrong, and a face pressed flat, as if crushed between invisible pains. Its eyes were pits of silence, and from its mouth spilled the overlapping whispers Adrian had heard for weeks. "Stay with us." He bolted upward, clawing toward the fourth floor, but the space folded around him. His flashlight fell, vanishing into the gap, its beams swallowed whole. Behind him, the figure pressed against the air, its form warping the stairwell like glass under strain. Hands reached from the void, dozens of them, pale and rigid, clutching at his arms, his legs, his throat. Adrian screamed, pulling free, slamming himself through the fourth floor door. It gave way, spilling him into the corridor. He collapsed, gasping, the sound of footsteps echoing still, this time inside his skull. When he returned the next day, the stairwell looked normal again. Solid walls, ordinary steps, no trace of distortion. His neighbors avoided his eyes, yet he noticed something chilling. In the cracks of the plaster, faint charcoal smudges shaped like hands. His hands? Weeks passed. Adrian rarely left his apartment. He tried to work, but the drawings came unbidden, filling sketchbooks with images of stairwells that led nowhere. At night, he no longer heard the pacing in the stairwell. Instead, he heard it in his apartment, between the kitchen and the bedroom, between ceiling and floor. Sometimes, when he caught his reflection in the window at night, he looked taller, thinner, his features smudged like his sketches. His voice, when he spoke aloud, sometimes overlapped itself, whispering faintly after each word. The building had claimed him. When a new tenant eventually moved into Blackwood Street, they found Adrian's apartment abandoned. The rent was still paid, but no one answered the door. Inside, the walls were covered in drawings of stairwells and faceless figures. The stairwell itself was silent until midnight. That was when the new tenant first heard footsteps. Not above, not below, but between.